Our July parenting class focused on brain development and the role life experiences, particularly adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, play in developing a child's
Ask me
brain.
a different question. I'll
It
give
was
you an
led by
answer.
Emily Sain
That's a little
and began with
confused.
a
Okay.
drawing exercise
So draw a line.
to help attendees understand how life experiences can shape us.
Draw another line. Draw a square. Draw a circle. Draw a triangle. I'm going to make sure you know all your shapes. Draw a smiley face. Draw a house. And when you're done, hold up your artwork for everybody to see. So we can see your lovely artwork. So, what are some things that we noticed about everybody's drawings? It's different. You all had the same instructions, but you chose to draw and write them down differently. So the reason why we think that this activity is important is because we recognize that the events and trauma that we face in our childhood shape the way that we perceive things as we become an adult. And so when you experience ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, it can make where me and you could face the same thing, but because our childhoods are different, we perceive the events completely different. Make sense? Okay. So this is our mission statement. We work to change the culture of Tennessee so that the state's overarching philosophy, policies, programs, practices for children, youth, and young adult utilize the latest brain science to prevent and mitigate the impact of adverse childhood experiences. So that's basically a way of saying that they have studied this and they have learned that when we step in and do this presentation and stuff, it makes people realize that there are ways that we can kind of counterbalance the effects of ACEs as we become adults. This is what we call the pillars of success. So healthy childhood development is the ultimate goal. And when we have healthy child development, there is educational achievement, economic productivity, responsible citizenship, lifelong health, and that makes successful parenting for the next generation. And then ultimately strong economy or strong communities and healthy economies. This message is not just an opinion. It comes from neuroscience, molecular biology, genetics, behavioral and social sciences. All these different sciences have studied this, and they have come to the same conclusion that how brains are built and how ACEs affects us, it will affect how we are an adult and how our communities are. So, if we build a house, what is the first thing that we build? The foundation. How do we know that the foundation is not built right? Leaning, there's cracks, might have some leaks. Just like building a house, the earliest years of life lay the foundation for future brain development. If a foundation is laid poorly, we may see symptoms such as addiction, disease, academic problems, etc., develop later in life. And then a strong foundation in early years increases the probability of positive outcomes, and a weak foundation increases the odds of later difficulties. So, getting things right the first time is easier to try to fix them later on. So next we have a serve and return. Serve and return is super simple. I have a almost 14-month-old, And right now, he is telling me a whole lot of things that I don't understand, but they're very important to him. So my baby is babbling and making all these gestures, and honestly, he's kind of screaming at me sometimes. So what do I do back when I have a child that's doing that? I'll do it right back to him. If he says blah blah blah, blah, I'm gonna go blah 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 right back to him. That is serve and return. That's building a healthy foundation in his brain. Serve and return is super simple. Like I said, it's like a game of tennis or volleyball, just back and forth across the net. It's just that talking back and forth. Sometimes he'll point to something that he wants, and I'll go, "Oh, you want a cup?" And that's serve and return. Serve and return works best within a trusting relationship between a child and an adult who is responsive to the child's own unique individuality. Other adults who play important roles in the lives of the child, such as grandparents or aunts and uncles or providers of early care and education, these adults continue to play an important role in building resilience through adolescence and adulthood. So by this, we see the importance of serve and return. In Romania, before the 1990s, the orphanages were overcrowded and understaffed. And so we would like to think that the staff that was there did the super basic needs, such as feeding them, changing them, laying back down, if that. And they didn't have that serve and return interaction. So we see an abused brain. This was from a 3-year-old that went through that orphanage. And we see that there's a lot less activity than the healthy brain. The healthy brain has the opposite. They did the basic needs plus some. They had that serve and return interaction with that trusted adult. So, like I said, we see that there's a lot more activity on the healthy brain and a lot less activity on the abused brain. Make sense? In every brain, we have what we like to call an air traffic control system, but the technical term is executive functioning and self-regulation. And basically what this is helps us like prioritize, make decisions, multitask, things like that. And this system is super simple when we're a child, and then as we grow up, when we have somebody there to help navigate things, they build this air traffic control system into a more of a complex thing, especially when it comes to stress. So there are 3 types of stress. There is positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress. Positive stress is the everyday things that help us grow as an individual. So, like me being mic'd up, sitting in front of y'all, super nervous. That's positive stress. Tolerable stress is like if there's a death in the family, you usually have somebody there to help navigate those feelings and go through that with you. And then toxic stress would be like neglect or abuse.
The following 10 questions determine your ACE score. Each question covers a different domain of trauma and refers to experiences that occurred prior to the age of 18. Give yourself 1 point for each yes answer. Did a parent or adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? Or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Did a parent or adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch your body in a sexual way? Or attempt or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes, often or very often, kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Or ever repeatedly hit at least a few minutes at a time, or threatened with a gun or knife? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Did a household member go to prison?
Okay, so as your ACE score increases, so does your risk for health risk behaviors, disease, social problems, and mental health issues. So for health, would be like obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. Behavior would be smoking, alcoholism, and drug use. And then life potential would be like lower graduation rates, lower academic achievement, and lost time from work. And so as your ACE score increases, the probability of this happening becomes higher. Alrighty, so now I'm going to give you some statistics about ACEs score. It is very depressing. I won't lie to you. When I did this, I filled out all the surveys myself, and then I read all this stuff, and I was like, oh, that's depressing. So if it is triggering, please do not hesitate to talk to somebody. All right, so the ACE study found that the higher someone's ACEs score is, the higher his or her risk for chronic disease, mental illness, violence, being a victim of violence, and a bunch of other consequences. People with an ACE score of 4 are twice as likely to be smokers and 7 times more likely to be alcoholics. Having an ACE score of 4 increases the risk of emphysema and chronic bronchitis by nearly 400% and suicide by 1,200%. An ACE score above 6 was associated with a 3,000% increase in attempted suicide. Compared to an ACE score of 0, having 4 ACEs was associated with doubling the risk of being diagnosed with cancer. People with an ACE score of 5 or higher are 7 to 10 times more likely to use illegal drugs and report addiction. And then it also found that it didn't matter which ones you check mark on your ACEs list. So if you had 4 and I had 4, but we check marked 4 different things, we would still have the likeliness of the same outcome. But this is not fate. I would like to point that out. It's just a statistic. In Philadelphia, they increased the ACEs study to add more questions on it. So they said witnessing violence, living in unsafe neighborhoods, experiencing racism, living in foster care, experiencing bullying. I would say in 2023, they would probably have something on there about the social media and the pandemic. With this, all it does is just give the doctors or the therapist more intel about your childhood and some correlation going on. In Tennessee, in 2017, they did this study, and they found that 61% had at least one ACE score, and then 28% had 3 or more ACEs. That's 1 in 4. So I like to tell people, if you walk into Walmart and see 4 random adults, chances are that one of them will have at least an ACE score of 3. It is super common to have a higher ACE score. So if you have a higher ACE score, you're not alone. Alrighty, so this is what I call my little bit of hope, because like I said, ACE scores can be kind of depressing.
You can think of child development as a scale that has 2 sides. A child's scale is placed in a community and has spaces on either side where experiences and environmental influences stack up over the course of development. One side gets stacked with negative factors like stress, violence, and neglect, while the other side gets loaded with positive factors like supportive relationships, skill-building opportunities, and community resources. In the same way that the weight on a teeter-totter affects the direction it tips, the factors that a child is exposed to affect how they turn out, the outcomes of their development. But the way the scale tips and the outcomes a child experiences are also a function of the position of the scale's fulcrum, which is like the genetic makeup of the child. The position of the fulcrum affects how the scale responds to factors that get stacked on either side and how easily it tips. We know that fulcrums start in different places for different children, and that this genetic starting point is an important factor in how a child responds to experiences and how they turn out. We also know that the position of the fulcrum isn't fixed. It's a sliding set point. Over time, the things that load and tip the scale can actually shift the position of the fulcrum. There are points in human development when this fulcrum is easier to shift. During these shiftable periods, our biology can be changed, making us more or less able to withstand negative weight that gets stacked on the scale. One of these shiftable periods is early childhood, and another is adolescence. That's why it's so important to make sure that children have positive experiences, especially early on, and to continue positive supports throughout development. By providing positive experiences during these sensitive periods of development and offloading negative weight, we can shift the fulcrum, making children more able to bear the weight of negative experiences later on, making them more resilient. So, resilience isn't just about individual children, it's about the environments and experiences that get stacked on the resilience scale. Resilient societies are those that figure out how to stack more positives than negatives onto the children who will become workers and citizens.
Research indicates that supportive, responsive relationships with caring adults as early in life as possible can prevent or reverse the damaging effects of toxic stress response. The CDC recommends safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments to protect children from accumulating ACEs and to mitigate them. Safe means free from physical and emotional harm. Stable means familiar routines, people, and places. Nurturing means sensitive care and encouraging development. Children need all three of these factors in order to not just survive, but thrive. The single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. Overall, research demonstrates that positive childhood experiences lead to better mental health and relationships in adulthood. Positive childhood experiences are circumstances and influences that can be recalled before the age of 18 and include the following: feeling free to speak to their family about feelings, feeling family support during difficult times, the presence of at least two non parent adults who took genuine interest in them, feeling safe and protected by an adult in the home, feeling supported by friends, feeling a sense of belonging in high school, and participation in the community. Higher counts of these positive experiences were associated with 72% lower odds of having depression or poor mental health overall as an adult, compared to those reporting few or no PCEs. Overall, research demonstrates that positive childhood experiences, or PCEs, lead to better mental health and relationships in adulthood. Environment greatly impacts outcomes for children and families. Stressors like poverty, food insecurity, and lack of stable housing often combine to create more stress in the home, school, and community. Therefore, places where many children live, learn, and play are sources of stress that increase vulnerability and lower opportunities to build resilience, resulting in higher exposure to toxic stress. The roots in this graphic represent those adverse community environments that often lead to an increased exposure to ACEs. Ultimately, we are shifting to a new norm in conversation from what is wrong with you to what has happened to you. This science helps us shift thinking on an individual level when we see the symptoms of toxic stress. When we ask what has happened, it shifts our entire demeanor to be helpful to someone who is hurting.